So ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to another recap, review, and breakdown for The Penguin, episode 3. And as Oz says at the very end of the episode,
Jesus, we're in it now, Vic. We're in it now.
And we most certainly are. So I'm just going to dive straight into this. Go ahead, leave a like on this video if you do go on to enjoy it. Please, please, please let me know your theories down in the comments below for what we could see in episode 4. And of course, consider subscribing for more breakdowns on the Penguin just like this, as well as any and all updates on Matt Reeves' Batverse. So we pick up with Vic in a flashback set during the events of the Batman movie, going to meet his friends, but first stopping by at his family home in Crown Point. Now the news is on the TV talking about Bella Real being ahead in the mayoral race. As we know from the Batman, it was between her and Mayor Mitchell, who kind of got assassinated, so you know, as we know, she ended out on top. But Vic and his sister in the meantime are trying to encourage his dad to aspire to more, wanting him to charge more money for the special parts that he's getting for his friend Manny, and he even says, "You act like wanting more is a bad thing, but don't you want a better life than this?" Now, what they touch on here is pretty significant to Vic's story and his link with Oz, in how even though, as we're all aware, Vic is being thrust into this life, but he's got that inner desire to want more out of life. And the thing is, taking a chance on Oz can give that to him, especially with everything that he's now lost. And I just liked the little seeds of that all being planted here. And this obviously is quite a recurring thing this episode, and in fact, I would probably say that this is Vic's episode. Now, Vic leaves his family home to meet Graciela on a nearby rooftop to watch the fireworks that City Hall are letting off because of the election. And yeah, let's just say that there's some fireworks, alright, courtesy of the Riddler. Now, in this moment, we get a bit of a reference to some Batman lore with Vic's dad asking if Calvin is going to be there. And he's not too happy about that because Calvin's cousin pushes drops on the streets. And Vic does reveal that Calvin's cousin is Squid. Now, Squid, believe it or not, is a crime boss in that of the Batman source material. And funnily enough here, I found that there's some similarities between Vic's character and Squid, even making me think that they use him as a bit of inspiration onto Vic's character, even though Squid actually is a separate character that we see in the next scene. Because Squid actually has a speech impediment just like Vic, and also, funnily enough, after the fall of Rupert Thorne, he returned to the streets of Gotham to fill in a vacuum of power that was left behind, similar to, obviously, Carmine Falcone in this iteration. Now, obviously, that is Oz's role, and that particular story isn't playing out here, but it does make me wonder if Vic survives this season, and by God, I really, really hope that he does. Even though he's been thrust into this criminal world and he's way in over his head, that maybe he could become more and more like the character he tried avoiding in the next scene. I don't really see how you can't if you're going to technically be the future Kingpin's right hand. And so, even though we're seeing a transformation of Oz in this series to Kingpin status, we could very well, obviously, see a massive transformation for Victor, going from the person that he is right now, fairly green, or like naive, if you will, to maybe something else entirely. That's if Vic doesn't die. Now, when Vic is on the rooftop with his friends, I loved the visuals of this scene and the sight of Gotham's skyscrapers in the background. In fact, that's something we get quite frequently throughout the episodes, obviously. I like how they seem to focus, like Wayne Tower, or Enterprises rather, always seems to be in the background somewhere, and every now and again you can spot the main GCPD precinct that Batman actually used his wingsuit to glide off of at that part in the movie where he almost kind of died. And this is when Vic and Graciela walk away from Squid and his crew, and Graciela talks about wanting to get out of Gotham. The thing is, another seed that I quite like here, that they're obviously planting quite a few seeds to get to the point of where Vic is at later in this episode, is that he says he likes it here. The city's wild. It's like anything could happen. And maybe there is, I know he was kind of using that as a bit of a line, but there is maybe a bit of truth to that with how, I mean, I'm not saying that Vic is all about the adrenaline rushed thrills of what Oz has got him into already. I mean, maybe he's learning a bit of an appreciation for that. You feel your heart beating, Vic, you know, all of that stuff. But there is like a parallel between Oz and Vic and their appreciation of Gotham City, whereas other people look at Gotham and they're like, I mean, especially after the Riddler's bombs, and they're just like, I need to get the heck out of here. And so the fireworks begin. And I thought getting this perspective of the flood that the Riddler let loose on the city was arguably more impressive, dare I say it, than the actual shots we got in the Batman movie, because obviously just seeing it from a civilian's perspective was just a different animal entirely. The fact that Vic is in Crown Point when this happened shows the ferocity of the flood that just did this unspeakable damage to the poorer neighborhoods of Gotham City, which, sure, I'm not saying we didn't see unspeakable damage in the movie. You saw the flood go throughout the streets, but these are the neighborhoods that truly got hit the worst. And there we have it. That's Vic's backstory. He lost his sister, his mother, and his father. Now, when the music kicked in and we just see him panic, it was just ultimately such a heartbreaking scene, and Vic has nothing left, or next to nothing left, I guess you could say, which I think only solidifies the connection the audience has with Vic even more. He's a very likable character in the first place, and it was great to see everyone echo my feelings there when you saw episode 1, but to pair it with this tragic backstory which just catapults him into a place and where he is so out of his depth now, is just something even more compelling to watch unfold. Now, back in present day with Oz and Vic, Oz is pretty excited as Sophia is going to lead them into a gold mine with Alberto's new drug. We can't forget that this is, all been a part of Penguin's plan since the beginning, since he learned of that in episode 1. And once he controls that, he controls the whole trade. And he also, this is the thing about Oz, god damn, man, especially with the more clues we get about his past with Sophia. He even says in this moment that he expects once Luca Falcone learns that Sophia isn't playing nice, the Falcones will take care of Sophia for them. Which is just, very heartless, because he's kind of completely fine with okay, Luca finds out, Sophia, boom, you're gone. Problem solved for me, I'm still in the clear. And that's the reminder we get of Oz. No matter how much, more depth we get of him this series, the empathy that unfolds with different scenes, and there's some scenes in this episode that I absolutely love, because Oz is human. You're reminded of, but don't forget, he's still a guy that you love to not like. Now, in this moment, Oz even gives Vic his first salary payment, starting him off on $1,000 a week, and this kind of blows Victor's mind. I mean, don't get me wrong, it would blow my mind, holy crap. But we also, as this scene unfolds, notice how nervous Vic is of Sophia, as he's meant to drive them both tonight, somewhat freaking out over her being known as the Hangman Killer. And the interaction while Oz was taking the call from Salvatore Maroni, who's still chilling at Blackgate, when Vic let her in the apartment, it was absolutely brilliant. You can just see how intimidated Vic is by her. I'm not surprised by this, because just the way that Sophia walked into that flat, she does have this presence, this intimidating presence about her, which, I think just to sing her praises again, Kristen Milioti is just... And one interesting thing is that I'm also wondering about what Sophia reveals to Vic. If that story that Oz told him about becoming Pinchy's driver back in the day, maybe that was only half true, because Sophia reveals to Vic that Oz actually used to be her driver, and she wasn't surprised that he didn't actually tell Vic that. Now, I do want to say it is totally possible that he first drove for Pinchy, and then the Falcones, as he said in episode 2, were impressed, so they kept him around, and he was upgraded to be Sophia's driver. But then again, I'm also thinking, what if he just didn't want to admit that that story, Pinchy, was actually in fact Sophia Falcone? And so with Oz and Sophia, she just wants to go with Oz alone, leaving Vic alone in the apartment.
You do anything stupid, I'll sense it.
Now, this allows this episode to open up more story development, with him actually meeting Graciela in present day, the one shred of something that he does have left in terms of maybe holding on to his previous life. And so he invites her over to Oz's apartment. But this is evidently the first time they've seen each other since the flood. And she asks if he's heard from Calvin, and he says he hasn't. And that may be because I'm pretty sure he he is the one that got killed by Sophia in episode 1. Now, this is when Graciela reveals that she is leaving Gotham to go to California. And Vic obviously really doesn't want her to go, as she's the one tie that he has left, but she offers him a chance to go with her, which puts Vic in a very, very tough spot this episode. He then reveals to Graciela that Oz is a gangster and is even concerned if Oz would actually even let him go in the first place, but for now, he gives Graciela some of his money that he got from Oz and tells her that he will be going with her. Now, meanwhile, with Sophia and Oz, they arrive at the operation that's running for Alberto's new drug, and we learn some incredibly fascinating things about the origin of what is now known as Bliss. Sophia reveals to Oz in this moment that this new drug came from Arkham. Now, Oz is initially confused, thinking that this was all Al's plan, but it turns out that Alberto's plan may very well have mostly come from Sophia's ideas, probably when he went to visit her once a week during her stay in Arkham. Now, this is where we actually see the new drug, and they have a bunch of mushrooms growing. Now, Oz naturally begins to doubt it because, shrooms aren't exactly revolutionary to the drug trade. They've been around for a very long time, which is when Sophia actually explains that the shrooms secrete this sap, if you will, which creates a potent euphoric stimulant, creating a completely different high than that of a, shroom trip that you might get off the street somewhere else, thus making it potentially worthy of being something new and popular to the streets of Gotham, and one that could indeed change the drug business or revolutionize it, as Alberto said. Now, the issue is they do need distribution, and they can't use the Falcone crime family's connections there without Luca Falcone getting wind of that, so it is time now for Oz to play his role. But when Sophia gets back to the Falcone residence, VT confronts her about not leaving, and she takes this opportunity to criticize VT and the family because, they've got a whole bunch of muscle and cars outside now for their protection. Their men are being gunned down in the streets by the Maronis in broad daylight, but they're throwing a sleepover. It really does just seem like they're laying low and have no grand plan at all, which, Sophia's completely right, is a really humiliating move for what was once the most powerful crime family in Gotham. A move that Sophia isn't impressed with, nor one that she would make herself if she was head of the family. It does honestly look from an outside perspective, and probably to the other gangs of Gotham, that the Falcones are just cowering away in their hidey holes. This further contributes to Sophia's ambition to run the family herself. And you just know that Sophia probably wanted to gut him there and then, and you can see it on her face that she's like restraining herself, but she is indeed playing the long game. Plus, she probably got a kick out of that scene later on with Oz almost pulling out VT's tooth. Now, the flight, if you guys saw the details here, is actually labeled for 2 days' time on November 20th. So the show is getting along, considering that the first scene that we saw picked up on Wednesday, November 6th, right at the end of the Batman. We know from there on when Oz went to the Iceberg Lounge, it was a week later, but as the episodes unfold, we will be getting close right up until Christmas time. Matt Reeves confirmed it himself that at the end of the Penguin series, they haven't quite got to Christmas or New Year's, but they're getting close enough. So just to remind everyone, it does look like we could be getting a Christmas in Gotham with hopefully some snow in the Batman Part 2. The next day, Sophia meets with Oz for his distribution plan, and they're in Chinatown, and Sophia brings up that Carmine in the past actually pushed the Triads out of the drug game, so she isn't sure if they'd be too helpful. Now, Feng Zhao is the Dai Lo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they don't have a meeting with him yet, and this, I would say, opens up one of those twists and turns in Oz's plans that always seems to happen. As I say, he's got like a fairly firm plan, but there's always like a spanner thrown into the works here. So after introducing the new drug, which, as we've learned, Oz calls Bliss, and even telling him that they're both going to more or less take over the family or, do a corporate restructuring, as Oz puts it, they even reveal that they have Johnny VT's support, which is just hilarious considering Oz dropped his name on the spot. But this is the thing about Oz. He does think on his feet, as I've pointed out loads and loads of times. something that he really drilled into Vic's head at the end of last episode with him laying down in the grave. But to be fair, they do have dirt on VT, so that was the best name to say. But Link doesn't want to grant this audience with Feng Zhao until they've got proof and the go-ahead from VT directly. And I do really love the interaction that Oz and Sophia had in this moment and throughout this episode.
Look at you having fun, I can tell.
Oz.
And you can tell that she reluctantly is, but doesn't really want to admit to it. But as we know, Oz does actually have a plan here to make VT do what they need him to do. But meanwhile, with Vic outside, it looks like he's slowly learning the ropes here and there. We pick up with him rehearsing on how to tell Oz about leaving and going off with Graciela to California, but he gets stopped by a GCPD cop. And it's pretty sketchy because he's got all the product in the car. But as per usual with Gotham corruption, it's always going to be there, especially at this level. So the cop takes a payoff and lets Vic go. Now, after this, Oz takes Vic to a very, very swanky restaurant and fills him in on the situation with the cop. And I felt like this was such a crucial scene between both characters, as it really does highlight the growing fondness that Oz has for Victor. Now, when the waiter came over, Vic, as we saw, starts stuttering quite a lot when ordering his food.
Steak fried.
Hey, don't do that. The man was speaking. Let him finish.
And as Oz continues to Vic, screw what they think, let them wait, take up space. You've got fight in you, Vic. You gotta let it out. And that's the thing. Vic has been taking orders. He's even come through a couple of times, especially at the end of this episode. But he hasn't really had an opportunity to throw his weight around. He hasn't gained that confidence yet. So I know I keep bringing this up, but I'm so intrigued to see if Vic's going to go from this kind of coy, shy person who does have ambition, but will actually kind of walk in with a presence of his own as we get into, like, for all I know, episode 6, 7, and the finale. Again, I hope it doesn't end up getting him killed, but with the developments that we're seeing, Oz identifies this in Vic. It's just Vic hasn't truly brought it out yet. However, at the end of the episode, I think this is a connection to this moment in the restaurant. He literally, as we saw, drives that car straight head on into one of Maroni's men. So he is getting there. But the other brilliant thing about this scene is that we see Oz ask about Vic's personal life, what his parents did, their names, and you can tell that Oz is listening very earnestly. This isn't just small talk to Oz at all. He's genuinely very, very interested, and the conversation really got flowing when he told Oz about his father's true talents and how they actually really lied with food. This bond that they're forming in scenes like this, I really do feel like is one of the, hidden in plain sight gems of the Penguin series. Now, Vic then says that his dad never really got to eat in some very nice restaurants in Gotham in his life, which is when Oz says that ain't right and how the world isn't set up for the honest man to succeed. This highlights arguably the main focus in this episode, just that internal conflict that Vic is having between accepting this life or not. And it's true, like with what this episode is laying out through its plot, after seeing his mum and dad having honest jobs, if you will, Vic's already seen the reality that Oz has been describing. As he said in his own words to his father, don't you want more out of life than this? His family still ended up at Crown Point, and is that what lies ahead of Vic for him in his new life of Graciela? But this is when we truly learn why Oz chose this restaurant in particular, and that's to see Tina to ask her for a favor, and that is to, let's just say, pay VT one of her visits that they both enjoy ever so much, and Oz and Sophia walk right in on it. And this is obviously, yes, how they get VT's support. They confront him with telling him if Luca Falcone learns that he's literally sleeping with his wife, yeah, dude, you are dead. Unless you back us to Feng Zhao. Now, this is when VT makes a huge mistake in disrespecting Oz, saying that Carmine never respected him, and that people do not keep him around because they think he's smart. People keep the Penguin around as entertainment because everybody knows he's a goddamn joke. Which is when you know, Oz loses his cool, and if he had a gun in his hand, I wouldn't be surprised if, despite knowing he needs VT, if he would have let loose 6 bullets in him as well, because we know that arguably Oz wouldn't have killed Alberto and got himself into that mess if he had a clear mind at the time. So VT was very lucky in this moment, and indeed, he makes the call. And this is where we cut to the Triads Club for the trial run of Bliss. We have Eve Carlo there with her girls who are there to help sell the drugs, starting at 20 a hit. Vic is playing the role of the bag man, going around with all the product, and so the trial run begins. Except Vic is under quite a bit of pressure at this point to make the decision to leave or not with Graciela, as the bus literally sets off in 2 hours' time. But you can tell in this moment that Oz is really, really proud to give him this opportunity, telling him to have his shoulders back, take up space, you know, mentoring him. Like, we can't forget that Vic truly is his little apprentice, and Oz really does love that. It's very apparent, and how he wouldn't ask him to do this if he didn't know he couldn't handle it, and tells him that he believes in him. Now, this is where we get the all-important meet with Feng Zhao, and they mention that they've raised the price twice already this night, and it hasn't affected sales, so imagine the future of Bliss if he allows this to go through. But the thing is, Feng Zhao just doesn't want to cross Luca and the Falcones, despite having the support of Johnny VT in this somewhat coup, if you will. The risk is just too great, and on top of that, how can he trust Sophia after knowing she's been at Arkham? And I just love, like, it's such subtle exposition for Arkham. But you've heard it being talked about enough in this series where everyone, even if they haven't been to Arkham, like, no, like, genuinely, even though it's an Arkham State hospital, it is not a place you want to go to. Like, it just seems that it's like everybody knows it's just screwed as hell in there, and you guys will be seeing that very, very soon. Now, during this scene happening, we see Vic on the dance floor. People seem to be loving Bliss, and the club show starts with these explosion-like effects, and it gives Vic these PTSD flashbacks, if you will, to the night of the Riddler's bombs blowing up and the flood. And this time we actually get slightly different perspectives kind of in Vic's head, but you see bodies being swept away in the wrath of the flood. And back to Sophia in this moment with her sales pitch to Zhao. She does manage to convince him round to working with them after saying that the thing is, the people of Gotham need an escape after what's happened, and nothing offers a better escape than Bliss. And that's why, and this was really cool, I think, it's why they gave it to the patients at Arkham. It made the patients at Arkham content and submissive. Any pain that they had just floated away, allowing them to forget where they were, which is just nuts to think about, how to even endure Arkham, you have to take a drug like Bliss. And what I'm actually more interested in, and this is speculation, no spoilers from what I've seen, because I've seen up to episode 4, so don't worry, but what I'm wondering is, I would like to know who originally came up with Bliss. It must be an experimental, non-government sanctioned drug, if you think about it, and someone there would have been responsible for that. Probably a doctor messing around. Now, I'm not like jumping to conclusions being like Scarecrow or Hugo Strange, but you see what I'm saying. I don't know if they're going to get more into that, but it's for sure interesting to consider, as Arkham in this world is absolutely a corrupt and messed up place in all the ways that you know it to be, and you're going to see that. But on top of that, who is tinkering away at Arkham thinking, oh, I'm going to experiment and give these drugs to the patients? That's very fascinating to me. We then cut back to Vic in the toilet, and Oz bursts in so happy as the deal is done and just wants to share his excitement with Vic, and he mentions how proud he is of him, which is when Oz asks for his phone and discovers that Vic is planning to leave. Now, I think I would say that this is probably, out of the 4 episodes I've seen so far, one of, if not my favorite scene, because it's also just quite sad and really encapsulates everything in the episodes that we've got so far into just one moment. And the sad part as well is when Oz says if he wants to go, you know, what are you waiting for? And Vic is like, I can't leave. And Oz is hurt by the notion that Vic is implying that he's holding him hostage. So this is when he holds a gun to Vic's head, saying, "Is this what it feels like being with me? You got all the opportunity in the world right here, but this is how you feel." This scene also reminds me of how Oz not only has an insecurity with being disrespected, instilled by his upbringing from his mother and everything that we've talked about going into that, but it also ties back to how Vic describes him earlier in the episode as lonely, and how that light shines through Oz's character from time to time as well, especially in a moment like this. What it reminded me of specifically is that deleted scene in The Batman when Oz tries to help out Selina by offering her some money. And when she simply turns him down, saying like, "I don't need or want your money, Oz," he's like, "What, am I not good enough for you?" So instead of getting angry like in those situations of disrespect that he gets from Alberto or Johnny Vitti or whoever else, in these moments, Oz just kind of gets wounded. And I think this also most certainly stems from his upbringing from Francis, just resulting in that different emotion, because he's probably not only wanted to be respected by people, but also matter to those he's fond of or just a bit closer to, you could say, such as wanting to be seen by his mother as more than just nothing. And if he ever gets rejections like this, even something similar like Selina turning down the money or Vic now wanting to walk out on him, it's just like another affirmation of, you know, am I nothing? Are they seeing me the way that I don't want my mother to see me? Oz continues to say that Vic could have left whenever he wanted, but he chose to stay. How about you ask yourself why? Going back to that whole repeated message in this episode. You stayed because you wanted something better. You wanted more than your father ever had. Now, Vic mentions that his father would be ashamed of him, but Oz continues to say here that, you know what's shameful, Vic? Working your whole goddamn life and having nothing to show for it. You still think there's good and bad, right and wrong? There ain't. There's just this. Once again, highlighting those similarities between both characters that Oz most certainly identifies in Vic, even if he's struggling to reconcile that within himself. Oz grew up seeing all of this. Vic has had his own reservations about what he's grown up seeing with the way his father operated and how the world works, just, you know, from Crown Point. And so in this moment, you know, Oz tells him to leave and that he doesn't deserve this opportunity. Perhaps, you know, maybe he's hoping for a little bit of reverse psychology there, but Vic actually does leave. And we see how this affects Oz, like going from an absolute high to just like, you know, stooping over the edge of the bar. But Vic even takes Oz's car, which would have been pretty insane if he went through with this plan. By the way, you guys know it, Vic didn't end up leaving with Graciela, and I'd say this is symbolic of Vic finally now accepting his future. Now, at the very, very end of the episode, ladies and gentlemen, we see Oz go outside the club and have a few words with Sophia. And they revisit their conversation that they had earlier, you know, which was actually teased throughout the whole episode. And Oz does actually admit that he screwed Sophia over 10 years ago. But the thing is, he genuinely didn't know what Carmine Falcone would do. As he says here, Arkham, his own flesh and blood, I swear. I thought I was looking out for you. Now, as Sophia says in this moment, BS, maybe. I'm not so sure if Oz was truly looking out for Sophia. I think you could argue maybe there was a little tiny bit of that, and how you guys will learn more about this story fairly soon. He maybe, in my interpretation here, felt like, okay, it's a bit of a win-win. At the time, what I'm about to tell Carmine would maybe, you know, prevent Sophia getting into trouble or whatever, right? But obviously, it would also show that he was a good soldier to Carmine. So obviously, you know, Penguin wasn't just looking out for Sophia, but I don't think that there was not any shed of that whatsoever. I think there is something in him that did care about Sophia a little bit. Now, Sophia also says in this moment that she isn't the hangman, something important to point out. Again, last episode, the Gotham City radio mentioned that she was technically exonerated, and here she's doubling down again, that wasn't me. And what was it all for? And Oz admits in this moment that it was worth it. And you can tell that, like, I swear, like, he was almost brought to tears here just through how he was articulating how much, you know, what he gained out of what he did to Sophia meant for him and his life. A guy like me getting all that. And with everything we know about Oz, like I loved Colin's performance in this moment, but you just really do, like this was a sincere thing being said from Penguin. Out of all the times he may say stuff, this was actually something that was probably pretty honest. And I think that's what makes this next part sting quite a bit, just even watching it, because you can tell that Sophia got some catharsis out of hearing Oz being honest about that, and is even willing to maybe take the next step in learning to trust Oz again. Again, look at how well they bounced off each other this episode. I think she's taken all of this into account, but this is when Nadia Maroney rocks up with her men, which just, opens up so much sketchiness, considering Sophia knows absolutely nothing about Oz's connection with the Maroneys. And with Vic driving back to the club after making his mind up, he pulls through again, spotting Oz and Sophia on their knees. He storms in Oz's Maserati, completely crushing one of Nadia Maroney's men, and Oz and Vic make their getaway, except they abandon Sophia to whatever the Maroneys might do to her. Now, Penguin is absolutely over the moon with Vic in this moment, as really this just proves to him what he's willing to do. And as he says, Jesus, we're in it now, Vic, we're in it now. And oh man, they most certainly are, because there's so many things you can pull from this ending, and genuinely what I'm so hyped about getting into next, especially as we're getting closer and closer to episode 4, which is literally next week, and that is all I've seen up to and what could happen from this moment onwards. Because first of all, let me point out what happened in that conversation between Nadia Maroney, Oz, and Sophia. We didn't hear any of that conversation other than Nadia saying, Oz, you think you can play us?
We've been watching you, motherfucker.
You guys know what I've been saying. I've been wanting to see Shoria Dashlu get a bit more, and seeing her go full-on gangster here was just fantastic, and I'm hoping to see more beyond what I've seen in the series. But as I said, Oz hasn't divulged any of the Maroney side of things to Sophia, and that's because he quite literally can't, as they know everything about how he killed Alberto. He put that on the Maroneys. They decided to take the fall for it because, it still kind of works out. So let's just say this development of Sophia knowing that Penguin is in league with the Maroneys adds a whole new level to the mess that Oz has to deal with. And you can see the trajectory of the series from here on out with how much more messier things are going to get with Sophia having that knowledge, which is why I think, because I don't know myself, but this is why I think other reviewers have said things only get genuinely better and better past episode 4. Like, apparently the last 4 episodes are the best episodes, so if you've been enjoying episodes 1 to 3/4, like, imagine where things are going to go. So ladies and gentlemen, that is where I'm going to leave it in today's rambly long form review. I would love to know what you thought of the episode. What did you think about getting into Vic's personal storyline just a little bit more, and how now he's truly accepted his road in the criminal underbelly to rise to the top with Oz? Do you think he's going to rise to the top? Don't you think it's maybe just a bit too predictable if Vic ends up dead? Maybe he will. Maybe he won't know. I really don't know. And any theories that you have just going ahead with Sophia, now learning about Oz being in league with the Maroneys, this, that, and the other, there's a lot to discuss, and I cannot wait to see what you guys have to say in the comments down below. Now, next week's episode, we're diving into the world of Arkham. We're going to be getting quite a bit of context. That's the only teaser I will give you. I'm sure there will be a little promo for episode 4 that I might attach to this video. I don't know. Quite a bit to look forward to in next week's episode, so I hope to see you there. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss out on that notification when the breakdown goes live. And also, if you got to this point in this video, I would just really appreciate a like, as it does help this video get out there a little bit more in the algorithm. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna love you and leave you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.